Was sitting listening to the Beatles' White Album with a buddy of mine in the upstairs of a barracks. It was just across the street from the flight line, and I heard the 50 cal, and I went and opened the door upstairs. As soon as I opened the door, 122 hit the building across the street from me, and before I could think, I jumped probably 20-some feet to the ground. I think the only thing that saved me it had been raining, of course. The rockets were landing, and everyone was running. This sergeant comes running down and grabs me by the shirt and drags me up the hill and says, "Where's your unit?" And I just said, "I don't know." Stephen Davy. I was born in Boonville, New York, upstate New York, 1947. My mom lived in Boonville. My dad lived in Watertown, and they met at the high school there in Boonville when they were probably 17 or so. Very much in love, two wonderfully handsome people. And from there, my dad being in the Navy, we're all up and down the East Coast.
What did he do in the Navy?
He was a naval aviator. Yeah, he joined the Navy when he was 17 and lied about his age to get off the farm because his dad had died when he was just 6, and his mom fell apart emotionally, so he ended up living with his grandparents on a farm, and it was pretty brutal lifestyle for him. And I guess at a fair, there was an airplane ride in a Ford Trimotor, and he fell in love with the whole idea of flying. That's what guided him to join the Navy and get involved in the aviation aspect of the Navy. It was probably 1940 that he joined the Navy.
What did he fly?
A UPF-7, a biplane to begin with.
Wow.
A Navy trainer, which I have a picture of right over there on the wall. The exact plane. He bought it much later, and when we got the history of that plane, it was a total shock to him that it turned out to be a plane that he pulled maintenance on and flew when he was 17.
Wow.
So it was a very interesting story. And he had other airplanes when we were growing up. A nice Navion, which we used to fly to the beach in. Anyway, he was in the Navy during World War II and was on 3 world cruises, as I guess that's what they did then. He was all over the world and ended up in Hawaii. And I guess that they left Hawaii before the big attack by the Japanese. And he was aboard aircraft carrier. I'm not sure of all the history of where he went from there, but my first memory is we lived in Florida in Jacksonville, where he was stationed. And from that area, we moved to Rhode Island at Narragansett. It's at Narragansett Bay, naval station there. And we were there about 4 years or so. And then we moved to the D.C. area. We lived in Maryland. He was attached to the Secretary of the Navy at the time out of Anacostia Naval Station, which I don't think exists anymore. I'm not sure. It's just a little farther up the river from a national airport. And after he got out of the Navy, we were actually in Virginia and Florida. We were all, it's hard to remember all the places because I was still kind of young. After he retired, we were in the D.C. area when he retired. And then our dream was to move to Florida, which we did. And he had some Navy buddies. They all got together and had a construction company where they built homes. My dad was very clever with, he was a very good carpenter and just kind of a jack of all trades. So everyone built a house for all the guys, and we had a beautiful home right on the water in Lackland, Florida. We were there about 3 years or so, and I loved going to school there. All the kids were really happy with where we lived. And then there was a moratorium against building, so the whole thing collapsed. No longer did we have a business. Subsequently, we decided to move back to D.C., where he got a job. He was flying for Barry Goldwater during his 64 campaign. And I got to know Barry a little bit, which was very interesting for me. He was very much into helping vets, getting phone calls from, the war area to their family. He was a radio buff,
How old were you at this time?
About 15 or so.
Would your dad tell you stuff about his experience?
Yeah,
He would talk.
Yeah, sure enough. He went on some trips with the Navy to Anchorage, Alaska when we were young, and we remember all that That was probably in early 50s.
Wow.
And after he got out of the Navy is when we moved to Florida. But then we're back he was flying with Butler Aviation out of National Airport. And he flew for Barry Goldwater and other dignitaries. It was an oil company out of South America. But it turns out that later we found out that it was some kind of a contract with the CIA, which we knew nothing about. And it was kind of an interesting time. Well, we bought a house in District Heights, Maryland, just a block or two from where we were renting when we got back there. So I graduated from high school. And previous to graduation, there was a kid down the block who played in a band, and I got interested in playing guitar, and I ended up in the band, and I was probably 14 or 15 maybe. I got to where I knew the guitar pretty well for a young kid and took some lessons. And, the music in that time was rather simple, Louie Louie and the 3-chord progressions. And so one thing led to another. I went to high school and played in a couple of rock bands in high school, which really became my passion, playing music. My dad was very much into music. And
did he play the guitar himself?
No, he was a great harmonica player, believe it or not. I ended up learning to play harmonica from my dad. But he was a big supporter of what I was doing, helped me get a guitar, which I still have, a nice old Fender Stratocaster. And I graduated from high school.
What year was that?
66.
What was going on in Vietnam at that point? Did you follow that at all? Or no?
Absolutely. And in school, we were constantly talking about what was going on in the war and how frightening it was for us because we were all headed for signing up for the draft. Of course, we knew we had to do that right out of high school. And right out of high school, I continued to play in the band, living at home. I did not go to college. I just was playing in the band. Took some guitar lessons. My interest waned a bit from rock and roll to the jazz of the time, which was the bossa nova. And I met the great Charlie Bird. I would go down to the Showboat Lounge and listen to Charlie. And one night I was down there by myself, and they would ask me what I was doing there, and I would tell them that my parents are eating in the dining hall, which was not true. And I'm standing by the phone, and one night listening to the warm-up group, and lo and behold, Charlie was standing next to me, the great Charlie Bird, and said to me, "You like that stuff, boy?" And that kind of was the beginning of my interest in jazz. I still played rock and roll, but I was interested in music. It was a little more complex. And of course, within a year or so, I'm just like everyone else, faced with the possibility of being drafted. I was working at a toy store called Toys R Us, which everyone knows. And ironically, I was working in the toy gun department, which is
at Toys R Us.
At Toys R Us. And there was a guy there that I worked with, Tom Beck, and he had a sister who would stop by to see him occasionally. And that ended up to be my first wife. She was a beautiful young woman. Their father was a major scientist at the Naval Research Lab, which is kind of interesting. Catholic family. So I get my draft notice.
You got the notice.
I got the notice.
What was that day like?
Pretty bad. Everyone who worked there, almost every guy who worked there, and everyone got a draft notice almost the same day. And we were all walked in, "Did you get one of these?" And I said, "Yeah." So we were all freaked out that we knew that the war was really heating up, and there wasn't much chance they were going to end up in the war. In the summer of 67, probably the spring was when I was only out of high school 1 year, and I have this draft notice. I tried to get in the Navy. I was going to join so I wouldn't get drafted. So I tried to get into the Navy like my dad was in the Navy. I tried to get in the Coast Guard. Nobody, no one was taking. And the whole thing with the Army was looming. And just lucky, I joined the Air Force. And November 67, off to basic training.
Where was that at?
That was in Texas at Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
What was that like?
Pretty weird. I mean, I was just a kid, basically. I just turned 20 in September of that year. It was a total bizarre experience being all of a sudden you're in the military, I did pretty well because I was athletic. I could outrun everybody and outclimb everyone because I was a gymnast in high school. I was a pretty accomplished gymnast on the rings and high bar.
Was it like what you see in the movies? Did it feel like that? You were getting yelled at and screamed
Oh,
at?
absolutely. And in those days, they could really brutalize you and get away with it. And the sergeant was a Mexican guy, didn't like me, didn't like any of these white guys. And we had a lot of black guys who really didn't like white guys. So I got really roughed up a lot. I looked so young that I was just like a little kid, and all of about 130 pounds, 5'7".
Wow, yeah.
Just nothing. But I was strong. My older brother Vic, was a world-class weightlifter at 155 pounds, and he got me into weightlifting, and I placed and won some gold medals in the AAU, so I was strong. But these guys in basic were towered over me. They were big guys, and I was treated pretty rough. And the last day or last week of basic, we just tear the place apart, which I guess is kind of normal.
What do you mean tear it apart?
Just turn over the beds, throw everything out the windows, just raise hell. And then there were fights, there were fist fights, just everyone just, losing it, you might say. And at that point, some guy that didn't like me very much slugged me in the stomach really hard. And I don't know if that's what caused the problem that I had or not, but because I took a good fall in the obstacle course at the last week or so. Then, of course, from Lackland, I had to board a plane for tech school, which was in Denver.
What were they going to have you do?
Go to school for munitions training. And I was there only a couple days, walking with some guys across the parade field to get some lunch, and I just collapsed. They didn't know what was wrong with me. They took me to the hospital. They didn't believe me. The whole thing took me back to the barracks. Now it was January the 3rd. It's freezing cold outside. So they took me in an ambulance once, and then they took me back to the barracks, and I was just in terrible abdominal pain. I fell asleep in the middle of the afternoon and woke up, and I was in such pain. It was just unbelievable. And they called for another ambulance, and the report was that they can't send an ambulance for the same man twice in the same day. Where that came from. So they put me in the back of a pickup truck with a pillow and bounced me down the road to the medic, and he didn't believe me that I was in pain. I'm literally on the floor. I was convulsing. Anyway, so they finally decided to take me to the hospital. So they took me to Fitzsimmons Army Hospital, and fortunate for me, a doctor there identified that I was bleeding internally from either the punch or the fall that I took. And they had to do an emergency exploratory operation. 29 stitches.
Wow.
I still got the stitches, see?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, so then they took my spleen. I was kind of out of it. All the guys I was with in basic and had moved over to tech school, they moved on. And I guess in some ways it was fortunate because I met my great friend Tom after I got out of the hospital, went home, and came back to Denver at Lowry Air Force Base, training base. I still they wouldn't allow me to march because of the stitches in my stomach. And, but I met my great friend, Tom Glenn, who was from New York. It was just a great fun, just a very funny guy, just full of the Dickens, and we had a great time. He played music, so I played music. So we played guitar together and, really had a ball. And after the technical training, which ended sometime in the spring, I guess it was. So we were there from, say, late January until around May or something. And I went home and got married to my wife.
You got married before you went over there?
Yes.
Wow.
Because she wanted to get married. I was just a kid. I was still 20, I think. 20? Yeah, I think I was just still 20 years old. So we got married. I don't think her mom in particular was not very happy with this guy who played the guitar and, kind of a little bit of a renegade. And they were a Catholic family, there were priests in the family. So I was, I was not what they wanted, I don't think. Although over time, we got to be okay with it.
Go back to the training. What were they teaching you what were they teaching you there?
In the munitions training?
Yeah.
All about bombs, missiles, bullets, all kinds of things like, used in the war. A lot of bombs, how to fuse bombs. different shapes of nuclear weapons as well, because it would have been possible for any of us to end up at a nuke base. But that didn't happen. We almost all went to Vietnam.
So before they put the bomb, when it's sitting, you put it together so it's.
That's right. Yeah, mostly we stored it and took and housed it, whatever you might say, and a lot of rockets, 2.75 rockets that were carried by the A-1Es in Vietnam. So we were fusing a lot of that stuff.
How big are those things?
They're about 6 or 8 feet long, and they're no more than 4 or 5 inches in diameter. And we would pop the warhead on. We were supposed to use a machine or a tool, but in war, there's no time for that. We had to learn to pop them on. So it was called popping rockets.
How heavy was the missile?
Not light, but we would grab the motor and the head. It would be 19 to a pod. We would load them into the pods and then take them to the, in Vietnam, we would, truck them up to the aircraft.
Would you actually mount them on the aircraft, or somebody else did that?
Everyone kind of worked together at that. We'd get them up there. Most of our job was preparing the weapons and delivering them. A lot of 2,000-pound bombs, a lot of them.
Wow.
Napalm. We learned to make napalm.
You would mix it or put it in?
Yes, mix it.
What did that involve?
A big vat, and we would pour the ingredients in. Some people would say it's like detergent mixed with gasoline. It would make this gel. That's what napalm was. And we would get the actual casings of the napalm bombs in boxes. They weren't assembled, and we'd have to assemble the bomb, which was 6 or 8 feet long, and then fill it. So that was one of the jobs we did in Vietnam quite a bit. After the weapons training, we supposedly knew everything that we needed to know, which we didn't. We just,
right.
It was all on the job kind of training.
And at this point, you're going to Vietnam.
When I got orders for Vietnam, I immediately went to Fitzsimmons Hospital and talked to the doctor who had operated on me. He had told me that because of my injury, losing my spleen, that I would not go to Southeast Asia. I was delighted. Everyone else was going. So when I got the orders for Vietnam, I went to talk to the doctor, and he said, "Oh, when you get there, they have this malaria pill that you take every day. You'll see at the chow hall," which I never saw. There were malaria pills, but not the ones he was talking about. Supposedly that would, of course, I did not get malaria, but I get orders for Pleiku. I went to New York and got on a plane with my friend Tom Glenn. We flew over together.
Commercial? Was it
Yeah, it was a commercial. It was like DC-9. Actually, we flew from New York to Seattle to the military base. And that's where I think we spent one night, and then we got on the big DC-9, everyone loaded, everyone wearing their uniforms, flew to Alaska first for a stopover. And that was a little bit interesting.
Why do you say that?
Well, I'd never been to Alaska before. We were wearing summer fatigues, and it was freezing cold, so it was kind of an interesting stopover.
What was the mood on the plane?
Quiet, very quiet. Everyone's young and worried. Back on the plane at Anchorage, and next stop was the Philippines, I think it was. And then on to Cam Ranh Bay in South Vietnam, where it was bleeding hot. It was 95 degrees or something or more.
What did you think? What did you think when you got off the plane?
When I first got off the plane, there were a bunch of ROC Marines, Korean guys, all training, marching around. And, that was a little bit interesting, but it was obvious what the hell was going on. There were fighters being loaded with munitions, and we were being, shuffled about to go here and go there and get ready to get on the plane to take us to Pleiku.
So it was a busy thing when you got off the plane.
Very busy. Not everyone was going to Pleiku. There were guys who were, going different bases.
Did you both and Tom go to Pleiku?
Yeah, both got orders for Pleiku, which was great for me because we were good friends, and that helps a lot.
Before you go in there, had anyone told you about Pleiku?
No, not a word. I just knew where it was on the map. Central Highlands, 20 miles from Cambodia. Smallest air base in Vietnam, which didn't sound good. So waited around for a while that day and ended up on a C-130 to Pleiku. Landed at Pleiku.
Was it day or night when you landed?
in the day, early in the day. And of course, we're beat, tired, and we didn't know what to do. So they gave us a place. There was an empty barracks there, and so that's where we spent our first night. And there wasn't much to do for us because at that point, our area was 100% overmanned. There were just so we had the first week or two to do nothing, just kind of hang out and go to the Airmen's Club, play the slot machines, and drink a little bit.
How many planes were there?
Not very many. A1Es, maybe, I want to say a dozen. We had a lot of spooky birds, the gunships, C-47s. That was one of the major aircraft that we see there. There were Ford air controllers, just little Cessnas, and apparently I was at 633rd Cameron, which was the support squadron for Special Operations Group, 633rd, which was something we didn't know much about until later on. It was rather a secret to us. We were just doing our jobs. We didn't know what exactly the mission was, but our planes were flying into Cambodia, I can tell you that.
So was it kind of boring being there the first few weeks? Or how would you describe the first few?
Just trying to acclimate ourselves to, hearing the scuttlebutt, people talking about, being attacked. So we got our flak vests and helmets and our M16s issued, which I was shocked about that because I didn't think we were going to be.
You thought you were going to be way behind the lines.
Well, I didn't know that the air base at Pleiku was not surrounded by Army. We had Engineer Hill, Camp Holloway, which is a helicopter base. We were in the Central Highlands. We could see for quite a distance. And there was 5th Special Forces almost just on the outside of our base. And that was also rather a CIA thing going on there, which we didn't know about. There were Mike forces there. These were like, I would describe them as almost like Hell's Angels guys, Army guys with long hair and personalized weapons. And, they were just a strange group. And they were at that time, trying to recruit Vietnamese people, men, to get in the military because we were part of the Vietnamization program. And they were trying to get, the locals to join up. And we even had one pilot who flew missions, one Vietnamese guy who flew A1E. And they would always have a big ceremony every time he took off. It was very peculiar.
Did they have you start loading bombs at the beginning, or you were so full of guys you didn't really have to do it?
No. We just got sort of acclimated to what the job was going to be. But then, of course, when a lot of guys shipped out and we ended up taking over their jobs, then it was pretty darn busy.
Are you supposed to wear the flak jacket and that stuff anytime you're wandering around during the day, or what's?
Well, not at first. It was kind of quiet at first. Once it kind of got going, and it was quite busy in the bomb dump, loading and preparing the rockets for the flight line and delivering them. So it was getting kind of busy, but no attacks yet. And then there were a few skirmishes and a few rocket attacks, but nothing too bad. A lot of the Army camps, we could see them getting hit. 5th Special Forces may have been hit once or so. But the base, maybe a few rockets hit the flight line, but nothing in the area where people lived, And then things, kind of progressed. It was very hot. Then the monsoon started sometime in July. It's raining literally constantly. Then it would clear up in the middle of the day to a sunny sky, and then out of nowhere, it's raining again. And so in August, things started to heat up, where we had to carry our M16s and our helmets and flak vests all the time while we were working, pretty much, which made things kind of uncomfortable, really.
How many missions they fly in a day? How
constant?
It's just an ongoing thing,
Yeah.
Day and night?
Day and night.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of spooky birds going up at night, the gunships. We could watch them in the distance.
Describe the spooky bird and what you guys did on it.
Mostly we would just load the 30 cal, lots of, just literally millions of rounds of 30 cal and 20 mil. The 20 mil generally went on the A1Es, Sky Raiders. And I think later on the spooky birds also had 20 mil. in the nose end of the aircraft. But a lot of, literally millions of rounds of 30 cal for the M60 Gatling guns on the
guns did they have on it?
On the Spooky Bird, it'd probably have 2 on each side, something like that. Sometimes we would actually have to fly on one of the missions. I only went on one. I really was not interested in doing that. A lot of guys wanted to do it.
And would run one of the guns?
Not really,
just manage everything on there?
Yeah, kind of help out whatever was needed. And maybe sometimes use, fire the weapon. I don't know. I didn't.
What happened on the mission you went on? How did you end up on there?
Well, they found out that I hadn't been on one. So, it was it was one mandatory. Mostly I was on the flare kicking crew, which meant that you stood in the open window of the aircraft, and between your legs, you would grab the line and throw this huge, you've seen these flares with parachutes. They're about this round and maybe 4 foot long. We would throw those out, and we were part of a flare kicking crew.
Are you harnessed in?
Yeah, oh yeah.
How many guys are on that plane when you're going up?
Geez, I don't know. Maybe 4 or 5.
Is it just loud?
It's very loud. So I didn't do that ever again. And now, of course, getting into August, things are definitely heating up. And then the incident that happened on August 23rd, which is, I think it's even written in the Vietnam history, but they don't know the whole story. The story was that Colonel Spiker, the vice commander of the base, he was out with a nurse, right? They found his car outside her quarters with both doors open, and the command radio was missing, which meant the VC got his radio. And on August 23rd, we were shelled for hours. And they believed that it was because with communication, they knew everything that was going on and what we were trying to do. And we were pinned down terribly.
How did that evening start? You were?
Where I was, that evening started with the 50 cal going off. And what the hell is going on?
Were you on duty or were you off duty?
I was sitting listening to the Beatles' White Album with a buddy of mine in the upstairs of a barracks. It was just across the street from the flight line. And I heard the 50 cal, and I went and opened the door upstairs. And as soon as I opened the door, a 122 hit the building across the street from me. And before I could think, I jumped probably 20 some feet to the ground. I think the only thing that saved me, it had been raining, of course, and the ground was muddy and slick. And I was just wearing a t-shirt and blue jeans and tennis shoes, and I slid down the hill and got tangled in a fence. The rockets were landing and everyone was running, and I'm in t-shirt, like a civilian,
And the machine guns going off?
Everything's going.
It's just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
This sergeant comes running down and grabs me by the shirt and drags me up the hill and says, "Where's your unit?" And I just said, "I don't know," because I was not near my buddies, and threw me into the bunker. And I met up with the guy that I was sitting listening to the music with. He was also a musician who was playing in a band there. That's what gave me the idea to form a band.
That night?
No, I've been thinking about it.
Before that, talk to him. Yeah.
Anyway, so we met up, and the bombs just kept landing, some pretty close. He said, "Let's get the hell out of here. I know where there's a bunker that no one goes to." So we ran out in the middle of everything landing, and all these rockets coming in, mortars coming in, and we went into this bunker. And we didn't have any light. He just had a lighter. We lit the lighter, and there was tall grass in this bunker because no one ever goes in there. So we took I think we had one jacket of his, and we threw it down, and we pressed the tall grass down. And we're so exhausted at this point, I just fell asleep in the grass there. And little by little, the bombing kind of started to slow down a bit. And then we were conked out, sleeping for I don't know how many hours. And they were cleaning out the bunkers, and someone came in with a flashlight and put the flashlight right in my eye and said, "It's all over." And for a moment, I thought, I'm dead. I swear to God, I thought that was it. And he said, they called all clear. And so we got out and we walked around the base and everything was messed. The barracks had been hit with rockets. Our water supply had been hit with a rocket. Our Airmen's Club had been hit with a rocket. So the place was a mess. So I went and met up with my buddies, that I wasn't with at the barracks. And I met up with Tommy and he said, Christ, man, where were you? We didn't know what happened to you. I told him what happened. And then we went walking around the base looking at all the damage. That was maybe one of the worst attacks. After that point, everyone was on edge, and there were more rocket attacks.
Did you ever have to stand watch?
Oh, yeah. There was a time when we were told that the reports were that 1,500 North Vietnamese regulars were headed towards our base, and we had to defend ourselves. So for like 3 or 4 days, first preparation was to clear out all the bunkers along the perimeter, which no one had been doing. And there were huge snakes in these bunker holes. I mean, we're not talking 5, 6, we're talking 8 or 9 foot long snakes, huge snakes. And we had the Vietnamese helping us clear out these bunkers. And one incident, I'm in a bunker and I hear these Vietnamese guys screaming and hollering. And I look over and 2 of them had the tail of a snake. And they probably had 6 or 8 feet of it out of the hole. And there was more. And of course, when the Vietnamese encounter a snake, they beat it until it disappears. That's just what they do. And they beat this snake and beat it. And we said, hey, it's dead, okay? But no, that's not good enough. They had to literally beat it until it was almost gone. They couldn't even identify what it was.
Gosh.
So we spent 3 or 4 days on the perimeter in these foxholes, with our weapons ready to roll.
Were you taking fire every night?
But we could hear and see there was lots of air activity with the spooky birds, but they must have run them off because they did not show up. We thought we were going to be overrun. And during that time when we were in the bunkers, in those days, there was a lot of racial problems. And there was a black guy who hated me because I don't know why. And he said, if they come for you, Davy, don't expect me to help your ass.
Oh, gosh. That's wild.
I said, we're on the same side. He says, really?
Wow.
Terrible.
So you felt a lot of racial tension then?
Yeah, it was terrible. We had a time when the Safaris, a great surf band, showed up at our base for whatever reason, and they were playing at the Airmen's Club. And when I went in, there was a huge crowd, and being short, I grabbed a chair, and I stood on the chair, and I was, so I could see the band. And some huge black guy just grabbed me and threw me off the chair. And, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
You don't call the MPs because someone's going to beat your ass. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
how often were people coming to play at the?
Pretty regular. We had a lot of Filipino bands that would show up. So that was also another thing that give us an idea, that, we were going to put this band together, and we had already started. And we met this Sergeant Isaacs, and he said he would fund the band. So he'd sent, I think once a week, a cargo plane would go to Hong Kong and pick up supplies, I guess, beer and whatever, and cameras and all kinds of stuff, and bring it back. And so he said he would fund the band. So we told him what we needed: a couple guitars, amplifiers, PA system, set of drums, and a bass guitar. So he came back with all this stuff, and we started rehearsing.
What did you call the band?
Whoever We Are. Actually, the first band was called the New Generations Band. I even have the card with Sergeant Isaac's name on it.
Your agent?
Yeah, our agent. Anyway, we started rehearsing. We rehearsed in a little gun shop down at night. At first, we were all on day shift, but as the war started to heat up, I decided I want to be on night shift. I want to be awake when this crap happens. Getting woke up in the middle of the night with bombs landing is like.
How long was the shift?
12 hours.
And was it 5 days, 6 days a week? It was 7 days?
7 days.
Were you exhausted at the end of one of those?
Absolutely.
How many bombs do you think you would?
Just nonstop.
Wow.
Nonstop loading bombs, taking them up to the flight line.
How many bombs did that A1 hold?
Geez, I guess it depends on, there were 250s, 500s, 750s, and 2,000 pounders. I don't know, maybe 6 or 8.
Anything dicey ever happen while you were doing the bombs?
Yeah, we had a lot of the people who ended up coming to Vietnam after I was there were sergeants who were had been in a long time, but they wanted to get that extra cash. If you're in a war zone, you get extra
Hazard pay or whatever.
hazard pay, right? $130, I think it was $135 a month extra. So we'd get these guys who had cross-trained into munitions, who outranked us, and they didn't want to listen to us because they outranked us. And one evening, you talk about dicey, this one guy who was not going to listen to me, even though I knew what was going on. I'd been there in a few months, and I knew my job. And it was a buddy system, always 2 people. If you went down to take a load of bombs to the flight line, 2 people. And it was really hilly where our bomb dump it wasn't a flat space. It was kind of, everything in Pleiku was kind of mountainous and hilly. So this guy decided he was going to go down and carry a load by himself without a person, without the buddy system. And I told him, can't do that. And then he gave me a bunch of guff, he outranked me. Okay, Sarge, go ahead. So lo and behold, he went down there. Of course, the tires are chalked. You have to pull the chalks. And then that's why you need the buddy system. One guy's in there at the tractor holding his foot on the brake, and the other guy's pulling the chalks. He jumps in the back. Then off you go. Well, he pulled the chalks, and the tractor started rolling down the hill with a load of bombs. And he tried to jump in. He fell under the wheel and got ran over. And he was in bad shape. Down through the perimeter fence, set off all the flares, and into the rice paddies goes all the bombs.
Gosh. Was that at night?
At night.
Oh.
So that would cause a huge problem. And as soon as that happened, of course, we had VC now are going to come in because they see there's an opening. That happened a couple times. And so the alert, and everyone is, I saw what I thought were VC in the bomb dump. Of course, they would be carrying satchel charges. They're going to blow us up. And nothing happened that night beyond that, other than the poor man was badly injured. Air evac'd out.
Never saw him again.
Never saw him again.
What was the tractor? Was it just an old-fashioned tractor?
No, it was just a tractor that they used on the flight line. Very heavy duty, but really old stuff. We didn't have anything modern. It was all, Korean or World War II surplus stuff.
The dump ever get hit with a rocket or anything?
Close.
That would
have been bad.
Yeah.
That was one of the problems with working at night in the bomb dump. Although it did happen. There was after that one incident, the Army wanted to bring a convoy of trucks loaded with munitions, cannon rounds, into the bomb dump. So the bomb dump was a circle. You came in and it was a one-way going one way, So the Army brings in all these loaded to the gills with artillery shells, all these huge trucks, 10-ton series, and they're all in a circle. And that happened at night. And that particular night we got hit with rockets did land in the bomb dump. But lucky for me that while I was working in this area that I usually never worked, in a flare, I was doing something with flares. I was bitten by a scorpion right here in my stomach. At least that's what I thought it was. It hurt, and it was all of a sudden my stomach is swollen up like, oh my God, what's happened? So I had to go Tommy Glenn and I head to the medic. He kind of gave me something for it, whatever it was. He said he didn't think it was a scorpion. It was some kind of spider bite. So he cleared me, and I went back to the barracks. And while I'm back to the barracks, there's a rocket attack. Get back after the rocket attack is over. We get back to the bomb dump area where I was working. There was a giant hole where a rocket hit. And that rocket came so close. There was a truck loaded with munitions parked right there. They found a fin of the rocket that was, on the munitions, on one of the crates of the missed by an inch maybe.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then another night we had an emergency landing of a C-4, jet. We can't land jets at the Pleiku. They could land a 141 because they could stop short, but the C-4, F-4 Phantom had to land, emergency land, and overran the runway and into the bomb dump right over my head and hit the perimeter fence. So they saved the guy. He was okay, but of course the VC were waiting for opportunities. One other event of the convoy of munitions, early that morning, we were all standing around having our coffee, just chatting it up before it was probably 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I look out at one of the big trucks loaded with munitions, and I said, "That truck looks like it has a flat tire," because it was leaning over.
Yeah.
So we all go down there. It wasn't a flat tire at all. It was sinking into the ground because the VC had tunneled in right underneath that truck, and it was just a huge opening filled with satchel charges. They were going to blow us up. And then we trailed out under the perimeter fence into the rice paddies. They were actually tunneled somehow in the rice paddies right where I would be working pretty regularly. How they did that, I don't know. But they came in, and they right under where we were working, they were coming in with satchel charges, to blow us up. And because that truck was sitting there and sunk into the ground, that was the only way that we knew. Unbelievable, right? So a lot of close calls.
The locals, did you have much interaction with locals?
Yeah, the locals worked on the base. The women washed our clothes. They worked in there was a little bit of a hamburger joint. And of course you would see them in the chow hall, working in the chow hall.
Uh-huh.
You'd have loved the chow hall. I mean, the rice was speckled with black bugs. And at first when I saw that, I'm not eating that. Well, what are you going to eat? Bugs. We're eating bugs every day.
Honestly, Stephen, it sounds like you've landed in Mars. And
Tell me about
everything about that just doesn't smack as normal, right?
So the locals would come on the base, and frequently some of the locals who worked on the base, the women, were stealing money
out of their people's lockers or something.
No, where they worked at the little restaurant or the Airmen's Club, they were stealing money, and they were hiding it in a place where normally no one would ever expect to look. So we had to have a female on the base, a nurse, check them out for stealing money. And it was a kind of a deal, we didn't realize what was going on.
How far away was the nearest village? Were you right by a village, right by the town?
Right outside the base, there was a Montagnard village. Then maybe a couple miles down the road was Pleiku City.
What was it like?
Just a disaster.
Would you ever go there?
Oh, yeah. There were a lot of prostitutes in there. So all the guys would go, to the massage parlor, right?
Yeah.
The usual stuff. And, a bunch of young guys, bunch of young horny guys, right? They're going to go down to the massage parlors.
Was it considered sketchy? Like, were you worried about running into the Viet Cong down there or no?
Oh, yeah. There were more than one, and there was only certain areas you could go. But one time, Tommy and I, we veered off the path where we weren't supposed to be going, which we did a lot of that.
You in a Jeep or you?
No, walking.
Walking. How far was it?
It was just off the main drag in the city. And Pleiku City was there wasn't much to Pleiku City. We were off the beaten path, and we were at a massage parlor sitting there, and all of a sudden we hear the MPs are coming. So everyone runs. Along the street, there were concertina wire, like 2 layers at the bottom and 1 at the top, probably this high, right? So everyone's scattering, and I'm running towards the concertina wires, and I don't need to get caught by the MPs, So believe it or not, I leaped completely over it, like a high jump, right? I was pretty athletic, and landed on my rear on the sidewalk just as the MP came around the corner. I would have been in the
gosh.
brig. They would send me, it'd send you to the
Oh, that
brig.
was kind of illegal to go do it?
Kinda. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
When you went out, were you carrying a gun with you when you
No.
walked town?
We
No.
could not carry a gun in town for some reason.
And tell me about the Montagnards.
Montagnard people were very nice, and we would take the bomb crates and deliver to them the lumber because they just, they would build fences. They had these huge water buffaloes that worked in the fields, and they loved the lumber because they would build fences for their cattle. And Tommy and I would, when we'd go to the Montagnard villages, these bulls were so big that we could sit on one of the horns on one side. They went down like that, and I would sit on the other one and go for a ride.
And you said the VC would attack you from where the Montagnards were, because then you couldn't. Tell me about that.
Infiltrate the Montagnard villages and set up their mortar and rocket emplacements. And of course, we didn't want to fire, and of course, I think a lot of that stuff was set on time delayed fuses, so they'd be gone. And I don't know if the Montagnards were neutral. They weren't for the
right.
They were more on our, I think they were more on our side because we would do things to help them, and we would go to the village and take them lumber. And we were AWOL doing this. Grab a truck, a big truck with a 40-foot flatbed and load it with lumber and take it off the base and take it to the Montagnards. And so we were always trying to do something to help the local people, which is something you don't hear anything about, I don't think.
Yeah.
You hear about war, but the interaction between the local people and the Montagnards was something special.
And you said, you told me before there was an orphanage or something there?
Yeah, there was an orphanage on the other side of Pleiku that Tommy and I used to go to, and he would have his mom send clothing and socks and shoes, for the children.
How many kids were in there?
Hundreds. Some missing arms and legs. It was very sad. But it always showed the goodness of Americans, really, to try to help the people. That's another aspect to the war that I don't think people ever hear about. But it was something that broke our hearts, because we knew that the families, most of the men in the families ran away or were killed.
Yeah.
It was a very sad situation.
Yeah.
So we would frequently go to the orphanage and take them, because our parents would send a box of blue jeans, that you'd get at Penny's, with the elastic waist.
Yeah.
Little ones, socks, tennis shoes, and T-shirts for the kids.
They were probably always happy to see you, weren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Well, it's okay.
Yeah. And we did what we could,
Okay. Let's get to the band.
To the band.
How long had you been out there when you formed the band?
Well, there was already one band already formed. I'm trying to remember. It was the 2-Corps headquarters were a bunch of old French buildings, and that was just a little bit north. See, Pleiku Air Base was kind of like on a hill, and then it would go up to the top, and that was 2-Corps headquarters was up there. A lot of old French buildings, a bar, and officers, and a hospital. So we would go up there, and we heard this one band play.
Did you know the guys in that band?
I got to know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy that I was with the night of the bad attack was the bass player in the band. That's how and he had just received the Beatles' White Album from Hong Kong, so that was interesting. So these guys were beginning to get to the end of their time, so they were moving on. So Tommy and I, we would perform with a couple of acoustic guitars for the doctors and the nurses at some of the gigs, at some of their parties. Little by little, we met a guy, a pilot who played the drums.
Was he a pilot of one of the A1s?
He was a pilot of a Spooky Bird, and he played the drums. He was a little older than us. He was a lieutenant. We were all two-stripers, we were just kids. So he played the drums, and got talking to him, and he had a buddy fly to Hong Kong and get the equipment, and we had someone to help us pay for it. Actually, I was in 2 bands. The first one was with Tommy Glenn and I, and we put that band together we started putting it together almost within a month or so being there, and we got some gigs.
What was the first show you did? Do you remember that?
I'm not sure I do, but we didn't play on the air base very much. It was generally at an army camp. I think Camp Holloway, played Camp Holloway, They had a big place there.
How many guys would listen to you? What was it?
A huge crowd,
Like
200 or 300 more.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And we'd play all the pop songs of the day, kind of.
Like,
and
how long would a set be?
We'd play for hours.
That's awesome.
And then we would play at a place called Engineer Hill, which had a underground bar. It was like a bunker. During the day, you couldn't see any of the cannons, but during the night, these huge 155 millimeter cannons would come up out of the ground. And those guys, that was a pretty tough bunch. And they had a bar that was like underground. It was a bunker, and that's where we'd play. We'd play there a couple of times. And one night we played there, and we're taking a break, and a couple black guys are outside smoking a joint. And they asked me if you ever had an OJ. That's what they called it. OJ. It was opium.
Okay.
So he said, "You ever had an OJ?" I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. So he handed Tommy and I an OJ. We took a couple hits. Oh my God. Oh no. And at Engineer Hill, there was a water tower, huge water tower, an old one, French, that was kind of abandoned. But during an attack, it was off in the distance. All these guys would climb this to the top and watch the war. They say, "Hey, let's go watch." So we're taking a break from the band, and we'd smoke this OJ. Okay. And we're all, ready for something, whatever. So we climbed this water tower a couple 100 feet up, very rickety. We get to the top, and I realize, oh my God, what have I done? How am I going to get down? I swear to God, I thought it was all over. So we watched the war for a while.
Was that surreal?
You kidding?
Were you scared, or were you just
Absolutely.
like, wow? How many guys were up there?
A whole bunch. It was a pretty big, the roof was, the top of it was this domed thing that I just kept thinking I was going to slide off, So,
and how far away was the action taking place?
Maybe I don't know, half mile, a mile. And, the spookies were firing their guns. I don't know if you've ever seen the footage of a spooky firing tracers, red tracers, just like a belt of red.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Unbelievable.
The sound, crazy.
Yeah, sound like an engine running. So we've got back down, and we back into the bar to play, and I could not function. and right in the middle of a song, Tommy turned to me and said, "What key are you playing?" And I was in the wrong key. That was a very strange solo you just played.
The key of O.
Yeah, that's what it was. So we had some good times and some scary times. Well, we played a lot at Camp Holloway, and we played 5th Special Forces. And at 5th Special Forces, they always like to have a stripper. So, of course. So
just a local, obviously.
No, I don't know who she was. So one night we're playing there. Someone comes up and says, "We're going to have this stripper is going to come up and dance. Can you guys play some music for the stripper?" So, okay. I couldn't think of anything. What are we going to play? So I thought of this old song, Honky Tonk. You know the song? That's why we played Honky Tonk, the key of E. And this black lady stripped in front of us when she had a towel so the audience couldn't see her, but
she's exposed to you guys.
It was pretty wild, I must say.
Did they go crazy?
Oh yeah. And then she serviced a couple of the guys.
How often were you playing?
Just about every weekend.
Both Friday, Saturday?
Yeah. And the key was that we had put in for midnight shift, right? So we didn't have to be there until midnight. So off we'd go at about 8 o'clock to, I can't remember this one. It wasn't Camp Holloway. It was another camp, but I can't think of the name of it. It was off on the, it was right on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Army camp, not a big place. Anyway, we're playing there, and right in the middle of while we were playing, there is an attack. My God. So mortars are...
Are you outside, or are you in a tent?
I'm in a bar.
Okay.
Just makeshift bar. And all the guys that come in with their helmets and their guns and hang them on the wall. And, we're playing, we're having a good time playing. Then we hear what we think is mortars landing. And the guys, everyone, what the guys would go to the bar, each guy, and get a case of beer. Sit down with a case of beer in front of them and drink every one of them and throw the cans. So the floor is completely covered with Schlitz cans, the old iron cans, And so we hear the mortars coming. We think, and then the guys say, "No, that's outgoing. That's not." I said, "It sounds like incoming." "No, it's outgoing." Started getting louder and closer, and everyone's all of a sudden the alarm goes off. This is an attack. So Tommy and I jump down behind the bar, and we notice there's a phone right there, just down below the top of the bar. And this attack is not letting up. And while we're behind the bar, here comes the commander of the base. He was like a major, all dressed in his, outfit. And he comes running in and says, "Who are you? We're civilians." He said, "Keep your head down." And he'd left us alone. So I get on the phone to call the base to tell the guys at the bomb dump, it's getting close to midnight. There ain't no way I'm coming back. Can you cover for us? We're stuck out here. There's an attack. He said, "We know that there's an attack. We know that." So when the attack ended, Tommy and I, we didn't have any way to get back. The other guys in the band had taken off with a couple other guys in a Jeeps. So all we had was Jeeps. So Tommy and I throw our amps and guitars in the back of a Jeep. And this guy said, I'll drive you back. So he had his 16 and his 45 with him. We're in the back of the Jeep, nothing of a Jeep, right? We're headed back to Pleiku Air Base, quite a ways, probably 8 miles away. It's pitch dark.
Oh, man.
And there's been an attack. And there was a lake. You can see on the map this lake where people sometime would go water skiing. I can't imagine. Anyway, we're right near that lake area where an area where the VC would come in all the time. And we get a flat tire. Holy shit. So the guy hands me his 45 and he hands Tommy his M16 and says, "Cover me. I have to change the tire." So nothing happened, but we were freaking out, right? Pitch dark, can't run the lights on the vehicle.
Try not to make too much noise.
Total quiet. So we're down behind the Jeep. I got the 45, he's got the 16, and got the tire on, and we made it back to the base. And of course, everyone at the gate, they knew us by this time. They weren't going to give us hell for being, off the base at 2 a.m. So they wave us on, and, "Hey, Davy, how you doing, Glenn?" Say the guitars and the amps, no uniforms, right? So we made many close calls like that. Many close.
And you guys were getting popular, I would guess.
Yes, we were. We were playing 5th Special Forces. We were playing Camp Holloway on a regular basis, Engineer Hill, and this other camp that I can't remember the name of.
What was the song? Did you have song they requested more or that you loved to play more?
We Got to Get Out of This Place by the Animals. That was a big hit. That and Bee Gees songs. We did we had good singing because, the Filipinos were pretty good but the accent always made it kind of strange. So when we had, us up there singing, it was like back home. Everything had to do with being back home.
Did you catch flack from leadership about doing it?
You better believe it.
What was that? What's some of that story?
Well, at one point they said, "Okay, it's enough of this. It's enough of this bullshit. We're going to send you guys away." So they were going to send me to Thailand, to NKP, and they were going to send Tommy Glenn to Da Nang. So we didn't know what the hell to do. We got orders. I had orders for Thailand, into the jungle of Thailand where they were building a base. Holy shit.
And that's just because they didn't like you playing the music.
They didn't like it because we were raising hell. We were all running around, having too much fun. Guitars, loud guitars, playing rock and roll. Anyway, so one of the officers who had seen us we played the officers club a couple times, and one of the officers, a nice guy, colonel, he heard him. I went to him and said, "You know what? They're breaking up the band. They're sending me to Thailand, and Tommy's going to Da Nang." And they said, "Okay." I said, "Is there anything you can do?" So he went to the base commander and said, "These guys are good for morale." And he got our orders redlined. But then the chaplain said, "I better see you in church." We were in the front row of church on a regular basis every Sunday morning. So we were able to stay.
Wow.
So that was pretty.
That's so great.
And then they decided that they didn't want us at the bomb dump anymore. So they sent Tommy Glenn and I to TDY, which temporary duty assignment, to the BX during the day.
What's the BX?
This is the store.
To run it?
to work in the store. So our job was to drive to the depot at Camp Holloway and pick up beer and cameras and records, everything that would come in.
Was that like a nod to like going, oh, this is more befitting these guys? We don't want anything happening.
I don't know. Or maybe they didn't like the way we operated at the bomb dump because we were late a lot, like we were AWOL and we had, they put us at the BX. So our job was to drive over to Camp Holloway and pick up a huge number of pallets of beer. So driving through town, not just once, but rather frequently, we get stopped on the way because of congestion. The Vietnamese people would jump all over the truck and steal as much beer as they could get. And one of the most eventful times, I'm climbing up this hill through Pleiku City and loaded down with 6 pallets of beer, and one of them falls off onto the street. There's this huge, mountain of foam. All this beer is all over the place, and a huge crowd of people grabbing as much beer as they can get. And then I get back to the base. What happened to where's all the beer? And of course, what we would do is before we went back to the BX to unload, we'd stop by the barracks and all the guys would come out and grab as much beer as they wanted because everyone had one of those little refrigerators, and also 2 albums, the record albums, the latest, cameras. And we would, of course, we ended up with cameras and all the latest albums, lots of beer and whatever we wanted. And we would just check it off the list that it was damaged. But when we went to pick up the records and the beer was always albums, always.
Yeah.
And then 8 tracks were big at that time.
Was it surreal playing out there, or did it just seem so natural?
Well, I loved playing. So, to me, it was great.
How many shows you figure you played out there? Hundreds?
I don't know. I never really stopped to think about how.
Was it like every weekend, pretty much?
Pretty much every weekend.
What'd your folks think about that? Did they know?
Yeah, I would send, photos of the band I can show you.
Yeah.
I have some good photos of the band. There was one place that we played. I wished I could remember the name of the camp where everyone had to come to. It was a small place, small army camp. Everyone would have to come and hear us because they had to. The generators were only enough to run the band, and the rest of the place lights out. So the club had a little power and just enough to run the amps. And where we were playing, the generator was behind the stage. So they had to hang I can show you a picture. They had to hang a curtain in front of the generator. So while we were playing, the generator behind us is running. And then, of course, all kinds of crap would go on. They would offer us women.
Groupies?
Well, no, the girls who worked on the base, this army camp was aware that the guys were going to leave the base to go downtown.
Oh, I see.
To see girls. So they hired girls to stay on the base, to work in the club, and to take care of whatever.
Keep everybody on base.
Yeah.
Your agent, how is he working into this whole thing? Is he the one setting up gigs for you?
Yeah. But then eventually we had, plenty of contact information. We would get direct, of course we had to give him some money because he bought all the equipment.
Okay.
So we'd make like $15 each every night, and we'd give him $5.
What's the furthest you went? How did you? And
that's a good question. I think Engineer Hill was pretty far. And this one camp that I mentioned where the generator was, that was pretty far out. Maybe 10 miles. That's 10 miles off the base.
In war zone?
Not good, especially when you're not supposed to do that. We had a lot of gigs. And there was I did actually have some recordings which got lost in the.
But they're missing.
Yeah, they're gone.
That's a bummer.
It is a bummer. Actually, what happened was I went after I got back, I was playing with a band, and I took my recording equipment with the tapes, and they recorded over it without.
Oh, man.
Too bad. You could hear the Vietnamese people talking and serving drinks. It was pretty interesting.
What was your favorite gig that you played? Do you have one that?
Camp Holloway. With the second group I was in, when we played more hard rock of the day. We played Cream and some Hendrix, things like that. And I remember a song called The Mighty Quinn. Remember that?
No, I don't know if I know that song.
Anyway, it was popular, and some blues, of course, but a lot of Cream from Disraeli Gear's album. Crossroads was our big song. That was what we started the night with, and that was in the second band. And when we played at 2 Corps headquarters, it had a very big auditorium, a really great place to play. The stage was probably 6 foot off the floor for some reason. And I'll never forget, we were about ready to start the show, and Fred Sidlowski, who lives in Arizona, was the lead singer, and he smoked Marlboros. And we're just getting ready to start the show. True story. Sounds crazy. And he took a puff off the cigarette and flicked it up straight up in the air, and it came down, and the lights are on the stage, and the cigarette landed
And it just
standing up. That sounds crazy.
And they thought you guys were magicians.
Something.
Did the crowd go crazy?
Yeah, we had some wild times, I must say.
Did you ever get written up in any of the Army publications, or you know what I'm saying?
And I don't know. I used to think we should have.
Yeah.
And my wife seems to think that we should probably, since she's in the entertainment business, she's writing all these things down. There's probably some on here that I haven't even talked about. One thing I'll talk about a gig that we were playing. I think it was Camp Holloway. We went in to this area to play music, and they tell us that there are these two black guys who wanted to sing with us. And they wanted to sing Hold On, I'm Coming by Sam and Dave, right? And so I kind of figured out the song, and we waited and waited and waited. And all of a sudden, these two guys came in. They were completely out of the field, basically. Took off their helmets, hung it on the wall, flak vest off, hung on the wall, gun, and grabbed the microphones and sang Hold On, I'm Coming by Sam and Dave for probably a half an hour. And the crowd went absolutely ape.
That's awesome.
It was a wild scene.
That is awesome.
It was awesome. Obviously, my story about being in the war is very different than most people. That's why I never had much trouble about what'd you do in the war. I'd like to talk about all the gigs and the wild times that we had. For some reason, we didn't really get in that much trouble. It's amazing. I think it was because the guys at the gate knew us, and they wouldn't ask us what we were doing. It was just,
Yeah, I got to think the leadership knew that was good for morale.
Well,
that's what I think.
I think it was.
It's just to get people's minds off of.
Yeah, and for us, it kept us sane.
Yeah.
Because, just going to work on bombs all day and ducking bullets. There were times, we were so young and stupid that we had a crane that loaded the bombs, right? And napalm. And one night, late in the bomb dump, early in the morning, we had this idea. Tommy always had these great ideas about what we could do with the machinery. That would be entertaining. So we stretched out the cables that we would pick up the bombs with as long as we could, and managed to tie a couple people to the end of it and put that thing in high gear and engage the crane to spin. So we turned it into like a carnival ride. There was hanging at the end of this cable, swinging around. And one night when we were doing this, all of a sudden we hear bullets hitting the crane. What the hell's going on? The VC were out there because we had a light that was going around.
They were trying to shoot.
They were shooting at us.
Oh my gosh!
We're lucky we never got hit. It's amazing we were reckless. I'm telling you, and there was a lot of marijuana being smoked. Believe me, every day.
Well, you get a bunch of young men and a lot of free time and explosives and equipment.
Yes. Yeah,
some stuff is going to happen.
We made the free time. Anything, but even while we were working, we're having, trying to have a good time doing whatever.
How often were you practicing?
You mean the band?
Yeah.
Frequently. Yeah, we'd get together whenever we could, we'd get together at the gun shop, sometimes another place that we would rehearse, which I have some pictures of the band equipment and me in front of it and all. One night we're playing there. It was at the end. We tried to find places where we wouldn't wake people up. So we're down at the end of the base in this, I think it was like a mechanic's shop of some kind. And we were rehearsing. And then we hear the door rattling. The hell. It was like a double door for a Jeep to come in, but we had it all locked up. And we hear this, someone's outside the door? I'm not opening the door. And so we got down near the bottom of the door, and we hear this sound like a large animal. It quit, and about 5 minutes later, we hear a couple of gunshots. A leopard had climbed a light pole, and they shot him. That sucker was like right here.
On the other side of the door?
On the other side of a very rickety door. I mean, all we had to do is take the lock off and open it.
Did you fly on a helicopter to go play a gig? Did you tell me that? Tell me that story.
Well, one night it was relatively frequently that that was the easiest way to get to Camp Holloway because they had helicopters, hundreds of helicopters, and each pilot had a gunship and a cargo ship. So one night we were to play Camp Holloway, and the bomb dump was at the end of the runway, just off to the side. The runway at the end would dip down where they would wash the planes. You couldn't really see too much from a distance there. So the guy from Holloway said, just meet us at the end of the runway, down there where they wash the planes, and we'll pick you up there. So we take all the band equipment down, and here I'm on duty, but they want us to come and play. So we go down to that area. Here comes the helicopter. I guess the tower didn't say anything about helicopter landing down there. Loaded up everything, took off over to Camp Holloway, and then they took us back in the helicopter. Well, at the end of the night, when they took us back with the helicopter, it was Tommy, Glenn, and I, and maybe one other person in the cargo ship with all the equipment. The guy who was a pilot lights up a joint and passes it to the guy, and the guy said, "Have you ever done a loop in a helicopter?" Are you joking me? I said, "No, I've never done a loop. Let's do a loop." So here we're all smoking, and we'd all been drinking and playing music, and he did as much of a helicopter loop as you could do. And we weren't tied down, we weren't strapped in, we didn't have any belts. The equipment, the amps and the drums were all just about upside down. And takes us back to the base. It came up to almost a year there, and we had a date to play the Airmen's Club on the base, which didn't happen. We played the Officers Club a couple times, and we played for the doctors a few times, which is a lot of fun. But we never played too many times at the Airmen's Club on the base, and we had a gig there. All of a sudden, we get orders for the exact day they were supposed to play that gig. We're going to leave. Hell, we didn't really want to leave. We were having too much fun.
The guys in Vietnam who don't want to leave.
But we had to, so we're sitting down at the airport waiting for our ride to come. It doesn't come. Getting later into the evening, it doesn't come. So we're sitting there right next to the flight line, and here comes an A1E who had had some trouble, crashes right next to the terminal. Holy crap. And then maybe a half an hour later, the C-130 that's going to take us down to Cam Bay, he lands, and he has to, because of the emergency there's a big hole in the runway now. He taxied way down to the end, maybe a half a mile away or something. He said, "Well, if you want to go today, you're going to have to meet me at the end of the runway." So I had my guitar, duffel bag, a whole bunch of stuff, We hiked all the way down there, and the plane was just about fully loaded. No seats. It's just a cargo plane. I mean, there were a few seats on the side. Mostly everyone's sitting on the ground or on the floor. And we're the last ones in. Tommy, Glenn, and I are the last two guys on this plane. And we're on the door. So the door closes on the C-130. And the announcement is, if you have duffel bags or whatever luggage, it'd be a good idea to sit on it because we're catching ground fire. So we're leaving. I'm sitting on my duffel bag, and the bullets are hitting the plane, and we're taking off. That was my last flight out of Pleiku.
Bet it was a relief when you got in the air.
Yeah, it was. Then we get to Cam Bay, and my older brother, Vic, he was stationed at Cam Bay. And I was going to be at Cam Bay one day, and I didn't tell him I was coming. So while he was sleeping, Tommy, Glenn, and I went in and woke him up, scared the hell out of him. Both of us just jumped on him, And so we had a couple days, or maybe a day and a half there in Cam Bay to hang out with my brother. It was about 125 degrees in Cameron. It was There's no good place to sleep. The coolest place to sleep was under an aircraft where the sun hadn't been bearing down on the cold concrete. So that's where we slept. And then we took off out of there, and I landed at National Airport in Washington. And of course there were protesters. And funny thing, on my flight back from Cameron Bay, of course we stopped at Seattle or somewhere and picked up other people. Jesse Jackson was on the plane.
Wow.
Yeah. You could tell,
Really?
big mouth. You could hear,
Wow.
you could hear him talking.
Gosh.
And so when we get to National Airport, there's protesters throwing stuff at us, spitting at us,
Wow.
Yeah. But one other thing that I didn't tell you is while I was in Vietnam, I was trying to make a phone call. And we had a place where we would go, and a bunch of guys would be waiting. And it was a cable call, like you have to say over,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm waiting for a call. It's getting late. And this guy next to me just happens to be a black guy. And he's sitting there drinking. And he didn't get a call. I got a call. So when I got the call, I'm on the phone, and it's Barry Goldwater is
What?
Swear to God, Barry Goldwater is relaying the call from me. He knew my dad because my dad flew with him. It was the most bizarre thing. I'm talking to Barry Goldwater on the phone. It's like midnight in Pleiku City at the base, and he relays the call to my mom and dad, so I get to talk to them. And then the cable goes down. Sometimes it would just shut off. So the cable shuts off. I walk outside, and this guy who had been sitting next to me, he was ahead of me in line, didn't get a call.
So you go in there, you put in to get a call, and then you have to wait for somebody to call you back.
Yeah, and there's a whole series of guys in line, and hopefully the first guy in line gets the first call.
I see.
It didn't always happen.
Right. You're just at the mercy of whether they're going to pick up or whatever.
That's right. So I got my call, as I told you, and then they shut the whole cable down. No one could get a call. I go outside, and this guy who had been drinking, he sees me, he says, "You motherfucker, you son of a bitch," white guy. He gets, I had, at that point, I had changed my uniform, and I hadn't had the insignias. So he thought I was like a lieutenant, because the officers didn't wear insignias necessarily. So he thought I was a young lieutenant, cracker, He was going to kick my butt. So I'm walking, headed back to my barracks, and next thing I know, this guy is coming up behind me, cursing me, and chases me so I could run. I ran, and he chased me around the base. I go,
oh my God.
So in the middle of the night, I run into the barracks, and he's chasing me. And as soon as I get into the barracks, I tell this friend of mine, who was a guy who was a black belt in karate. I've been studying karate for a while. I can't remember his name. I said, "Hey, this guy's chasing me." And as soon as I said that, the guy came in the door, grabbed me by the arm, and there was no way I could get free from this guy. And my buddy jumped out of bed and cracked this guy once in the back and laid him on the floor. It's the only way I would have gotten away from that guy.
What a crazy place over there.
It was. There was no, who do you call?
Yeah.
In a war zone, someone's going to beat your ass. Who do you call?
It's a little Wild West over there.
You better believe it.
Okay. You came home. Did you tell people you were in Vietnam, or?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, they all said, you're not the same person. You changed. Of course, now I'm at Andrews Air Force Base, and I'm pissed. And I'm in the security of the president. And I don't like this job. Spit polish, no mustache, short haircut, white gloves, Now I'm a policeman. This isn't working for me. And to break me, they would send me to the chow hall to ticket people for having their hair too long or a mustache. How does that go over? Not so well. So I'm being hassled.
Yeah.
A lot. So they put me on the main gate. I'm on the main gate one day. I've had enough of this. I've been there since 7 a.m, and it's now almost 2. I haven't had lunch. So they're going to bring me a lunch. Okay. So they bring me the lunch. It's a dry bologna sandwich with nothing on it, just 2 pieces of bread and a piece of bologna in the middle. a small bag of potato chips, and a half pint of milk. Okay. I put it over and I'm directing traffic like crazy, answering, how do I get to such and such? And I look over and there's a rat eating my lunch. Okay, that's enough. So I called I called the dispatch. I said, you better come and relieve me. And what's going on, Davy? I said, there's a rat eating my lunch and I'm going to pull my goddamn gun and I'm going to kill his ass right now. What? So they came down. The first sergeant came down. They took my gun. They handcuffed me, took me back to see the commander. And I went in to see the commander and he said, well, what's going on, Davy? I had the first sergeant standing there and there's the Major Trombley, who was a total ass. And he's giving me hell. And he said, what's going on? I said, I can't do that. I can't stand out all day in the sun with nothing to eat. I just can't do it. I'm going to flip out. He said, what can you do? Anything but that. Well, I see you have weapons training. How would you like to work in the arms room? Where you hand out weapons and equipment. Great. So he put me in the arms room. No problem. That's where I met my friend Rick Lang, who lived in Laguna Beach. He was a desk sergeant. I was the guy in the arms room. And no one could bother me in the arms room. I was locked in. All they could do was through a cage, hand them a gun and, the bullets.
So this was after you were doing security for Nixon or before?
This is during, yeah, well, you could say it was our security squadron, 101st, was security for the president. I had already been.
You already done that.
I already been doing that thing. And I told him I didn't want to do that. I couldn't take that crap. And I was a total rebel. They didn't know what they were going to do with me. After all the experience I had in Vietnam, just running like a crazy man, doing what
Yeah, it's funny, right? Come back, now you got to cut your hair, shine your boots.
That's
like,
right.
Look, I've been shot at.
Yes.
That doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Well, one of the incidents when I did stand one of the back gates at Andrews, all of a sudden we get a call, it's payday, and there's been a robbery at the bank. And he's headed your way, Davy. Got to close that gate. So I closed the gate, and I'm ready, and here comes a car with a hostage from the bank. And I'm just me with 138 and an M16. And they see that the gate is closed, so they're going to drive across this field. So they start driving across the field. I'm on foot running, chasing them, and the car bottoms out in the soft dirt. And the guy jumps out with the girl and he takes off.
So you're chasing after the car.
I'm chasing after the car. The car runs aground, and the guy in the front with a hostage takes off. And then I get to the car. I have my gun out, and all of a sudden there's another guy there in front of the car, comes up like that at me, and I just lost it. Of course, I didn't fire. I just ducked down. Then he's gone.
Did he say anything?
No.
You didn't say anything either?
No.
I bet you're just freaked out.
Absolutely.
So is that how it ended?
He took off, and I was down behind the car, and then, the additional air police arrive and eventually caught this guy. But that's all I had to do with it. I was done. Yeah.
So you did 4 years?
4 years.
Total.
And then when I was still standing gates, I kind of jumped back to another earlier time when I thought about that incident. But now I'm in the arms room. I'm the arms room attendant, and I'm passing out weapons and whatever. And that I just more or less turned that place into a guitar shop. My friends would show up at the back door with a guitar. And so that's actually the first.
Like you would string them and stuff, or what would you do? Yeah.
Or if they needed this and that, I'd, fret work or whatever. Yeah. So, that was, you might say, the beginning of me having my own music shop. But, while I was in the Air Force at Andrews, I worked in the evening at 7-Eleven, where I was robbed about 5 times.
Oh my gosh.
At gunpoint, yeah. So the fun didn't stop,
Tell me the story. You said you saw Nixon come off the plane drunk one day.
Yeah, it's true.
Tell me that story.
At Andrews, we would have these, security details for the president if he's coming in or taking off. So in this case, he was coming in. So the security details in force like usual. Then someone, who what we thought was Nixon got off the plane, got into a car and took off. So, but then they wouldn't let us go. They didn't terminate the detail, and they said you have to wait around a bit, So an hour or more later, a Learjet, a small jet, lands with him and two guys literally carrying him off the plane because he was drunk.
So there was a double.
There must have been.
That came off Air Force One.
No one really saw who it was. I mean, it was a distance away.
Right.
They kept it that way. So I just saw him being more or less, he was on his feet, but not really doing a very good job walking.
After you got out, what happened? After you got fully out of the military?
I went to work building houses with my brother in southern Maryland, near Waldorf. There was a prefab construction place where we made all the walls and all trusses and everything like that for this development down off Route 4, I think it was. And I worked there for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months. Then I told Tommy Glenn from, he was in New York. I told my buddy that I was in Vietnam, come down, you can work with me. Well, that didn't work out so well because him and I we just created, he was a bad influence, created a lot of havoc around there. So finally he went back to New York. I went on to another job building cabinets and working in a cabinet shop. And I did a little guitar playing in another band during that time. Not a lot. And my wife was pregnant with my first son, and our marriage was definitely on the rocks. It wasn't like anyone said, you have PTSD, why are you having trouble? Even though I had a decent time in the war, the readjustment, and I think the most traumatic thing was being at Andrews Air Force Base in the security. I hated that with a passion. And, I still felt like I was a 12-year-old kid, and I was still just 21, and working at the 7-Eleven at night. One night, I was the night manager. So I'm going to put the money in the safe, in the floor safe in the office. And as I'm coming out, I heard, I didn't really know what I heard, but people talking kind of loud. I swung open the door, and this guy just pointed the gun at my head and said, put the money in the effing bag now. All we had was in the register at the time, which was $100. He took the pennies and the nickels and the dimes, the whole thing, put it in a paper bag and handed it to him. And just before he came in, I had one of the guys move the sunglasses thing over so we could clean the windows. And it's double door. This one's locked. This one's open. Well, once he got the money and everyone was okay, he's leaving with the bag of money. No one's moving. He runs towards the door that is locked, hits his head on the door.
Oh my gosh.
And he's knocked unconscious. He's got a gun in his hand. He's flat on his back, and no one's moving. And we just stood there waiting for him to, come back to consciousness. And he did. And he got up and out the door he went. Meanwhile, we've already called the cops, and they caught him at the hospital across the way in the emergency room, getting his stitches in his head because he smacked himself.
Oh my gosh.
I was robbed 3 times there. And then I moved to another 7-Eleven where I was robbed again.
How'd you end up doing violins?
Well, that's a good question. I was now again working in construction at another company, and I'm working with a bunch of rednecks from the South, and I can't take this anymore. Okay. So one day I said, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. You want my tools? I'm gone. I can't do this. So I left, and I went. At this time, my wife and I had split up. My son was just a little baby. And I was living on Capitol Hill on 2nd Street in Washington in a one-room apartment way up on the 15th floor of this old building where I could see the Capitol right out the window. It was pretty amazing, actually. But that's where I was living, and I didn't have a job, so I went out and I got a Washington Post, look at the want ads and whatever. And right at the bottom of the page, there was a little message that says, knowledge of music, helpful but not necessary. Call Ben. I called Ben. And he said, meet me in Rockville, and this is my office. So I went in. He was in the Army during World War II and played piano. He was a great piano player, and he played in Europe for the troops. And we talked, and he knew I was a musician. And he said, well, when do you want to start? I said, right now. So I went to work for him. He was the boss of Music and Arts Center, which is a very big company now. They were very small at that time. We had maybe 7 or 8 stores in the D.C. area, one downtown, a couple in Virginia, mostly in Maryland. But I saw that things weren't getting done, so I reorganized the entire place and made inventory of everything and kind of brought everything up to snuff, and did a cleanup job just so I could maybe get a better pay. I think it was $5 an hour to start.
Right.
So I worked as the buyer for the music company for a couple months. And there was a man who worked upstairs who took care of the violins. And Tom Nerado was his name. And he played in the National Symphony. I heard a lot about him, but I didn't get to know him. And I had done some work on a guitar of mine, and I showed it to him. He said, you did that? I said, yeah. And he said, I'm getting ready to retire. I'll teach you what I do. So he went to the boss. He said, Ben, I want to hire Steve in the violin shop. And so Ben agreed. And so I went to work with Tom in the violin shop. That was 1974, July 1974. And when I would drive to work, it was during the time when Nixon was about ready to get the axe. I had an MG convertible. I would pull up in front of the White House and watch the goings on as I was going to work in the morning, which I'd drive up Connecticut Avenue to Rockville to go to the violin shop, which I was in heaven. That I had.
You really enjoyed that.
Oh, I was indoors for the first time. I never had a job indoors. I thought, this is a future. I have a chance for a real future here, working with violins and with this man who made violins and played in the National Symphony. He was a pretty big deal. He knew Frank Sinatra and all these people. Had played on many of the recordings. He was on television and,
wow,
numerous orchestras, and he liked me. So I was with Tom maybe 6 or 8 months, and he had some trouble with his back to a point where he could not walk. And I used to take him to the doctors. I would leave the violin shop, told Ben I have to take Tom to the doctor. And then he was having more serious problems. He ended up with pneumonia. He was in the hospital. In the hospital, they did some x-rays on his head, and they thought that they found a tumor in his brain. It was actually scar tissue from a car accident that he had had. So they started him on chemo, and the pneumonia killed him. I was brokenhearted. So from that point, he had already introduced me to Albert Mollier, the great violin maker and connoisseur and the curator at the Library of Congress. So Albert knew who I was. I was making my first violin with Tom. So Albert said, well, come on down. I'll see you a couple days a week, whenever you want. He was already pretty elderly. He was 84. He was born in 1890 in Rome. He was a big deal. He was a curator at the Library of Congress, did all the authentication for the Smithsonian, and took care of the Juilliard String Quartet. He was one of the top 10 violin connoisseurs in the world.
Wow.
And a humble man. I don't know what makes me feel that way, but he was so generous to me. And he taught me to make violins, I was really happy that I got that chance. So Ben kept me on, of course, and I learned more and more and more. I took a lot of time to learn with Albert, and I'd ride the rickety old elevator up and this old building to his shop, and I would spend some time with him, and he would show me great violins, Strads and Guarneris, the real great stuff, And I was in heaven because I had something that I could do. And Tom had passed away, and Albert would see me whenever I wanted to talk to him. And I worked in the shop there for quite a long time. And then someone in one of the stores I got to know, his name was Steve Rotundi, and we got to be good friends. So I hired him into the violin shop to work on the guitars, because Ben said to me, he said, you have to have a meeting because the schools in the whole Washington area, they need someone to repair their instruments, and I need you to say you want to take on this huge load. And so I did. This is before I hired Steve Rotundi. And so I said, of course, I'll be glad to. Ben said, okay, we'll tell the schools that we'll take on all the work, and that'll help us sell more instruments to the schools when they need new things, So then the workload became unbelievable. Well, I had a warehouse that was maybe 2,000 square feet, absolutely filled from floor to ceiling with things to do.
Wow.
So I hired my friend Steve to do the guitar work because I said, we'll take them all, guitars, violins, whatever. So Steve worked there for a while, and he was a professional guitarist and a teacher at the local store nearby. He gets a call to go on the road with a pretty good band, and he'd be gone for like a month. Meanwhile, the place is filled with guitars. I'm saying, you can't do this to me. Because if you leave, I'm gonna have to let you go, man. So I hired my younger brother, who knew nothing about. He was a good guitar player, but he knew nothing about what I was doing at all. We worked in the shop together, and then it got bigger and bigger and more demanding. So we moved across the street to a much larger place, and hired 3 or 4 more guys. I had to train everybody. No one knew anything. And I didn't know that much, but I was pretty capable early on. It was something that just came natural to me. So I trained my brother. There was another 2 or 3 guys who wanted to come work. So I hired them. I came to Laguna Beach in 1981. They call it top of the world in Laguna. And I went back home to Washington and told my brother, I'm out of here. I moved, and I had no money. I'm here in Laguna Beach, and I got nothing. I had $175 in the bank, and an MG that wasn't running very well, and an apartment in North Laguna that cost about $350 a month. And every dollar that I made working for Rick, he was a photographer here at the pageant. So I worked in the darkroom with him and at photo shoots with him for Architectural Digest and furniture magazines and stuff like this. But I was definitely having some problems with the fact that I had a son who was now 11 years old back in Maryland, and my ex-wife was probably going to marry somebody else or something. And I was broke up with my girlfriend, so I was happy to be here in a way, but I was broke. I wasn't used to that. Worked for Rick for a while, and then one afternoon we were working in an art gallery down South Laguna, a big firm, Oriental art shop, and the guy who ran it was very, very wealthy. And he got to talking to me one day, and he said, Rick said you make violins and you're a craftsman. I said, yeah. He said, how'd you like a job here restoring Oriental art? I said, that would get me out of the photography business, which I was making a dime. So I went to work for him. That was 1989 or something like that. And he had a house right next to his store, this beat up old house. And he said, you can rent my house for me, this old house. So I rented the house and fixed it all up, repainted it, new floors in, and, and paid him $500 a month. I had a little violin shop there, had enough room for that. And I started doing repairs for some local music stores. And that was kind of the beginning of my business here. Then in I think it was 92 or 93, I found a place in South Laguna next to a chiropractor's office that was for rent. $1,500 a month, kind of pretty steep. But I thought, okay, I'm gonna open my own violin shop. That's what I did. I was there for about 15, 20 years. At the pageant, when I was working with Rick doing photographs, I met this wonderful lady who was very sophisticated. Her family lived in Laguna, and her father ran this art gallery and owned this art gallery since 1946. When he got old, he had renters here, and he said, someday maybe you can take this place over. You can have a store here. And I thought, how could I ever afford such a place, right? So one thing led to another. At Warren Imports, when I was working in Oriental art, they went to China many, many times every year, 3 or 4 times, the big tours to all over China. And they asked me to go. I said, okay. I went to China for a month, traveled all over China. Amazing. It was before things got weird in China, when it was old China was still there. And so that was pretty interesting for me. And I had my little violin shop in South Laguna, and, things were okay. In the meantime, her father, he gave us some money to buy a house in Laguna Niguel. So we bought this little house, and that's where we pretty much raised our son for a while. Tom, who you met, is a wonderful person. Richard got old and passed away, and we came here and started the restoration about 3 years ago. So that's my story, I guess.
Looking back, Vietnam, what's your take on it now after all these years?
Well, I'm kind of glad I did it. I mean, what do you say about a life that was so, it's kind of interesting, really, when I look back on what I did, how reckless, all this reckless behavior as a guitar player, running all around Vietnam. Hard to imagine that I did that. Even to myself, it's like, really? The story it's constantly with me, as you may have already been able to tell.
Interesting to me meeting vets that they're so young. 1 year of their life is going to reverberate
through the whole time,
the rest of their life.
I'm going to be 79 years old, which doesn't seem possible because I still feel like a young person. Probably because I'm a creative person, and that keeps me feeling enthusiastic about my work, even though I have some serious health problems, some Agent Orange. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
2 days ago, I was in the hospital. I've been in the hospital so many times I couldn't count. And if I had to have a pacemaker put in because Agent Orange got to me, I didn't know what was going on. And when I first got back from Vietnam, no one was talking about anything to do with PTSD, nothing.
How were you affected in that way? Were you quick to temper?
Yeah, I was a mess. Drug abuse. I didn't drink because I lost my spleen in basic. They told me,
don't drink.
You can't drink because, you'll be a very cheap drunk because the spleen filters a good portion of the alcohol out. But yeah, the PTSD was obvious. I don't think anyone in my family knew. I don't think my ex-wife knew. I knew there was something about me that had definitely changed. I guess you could say I was angry or smoked a lot of pot.
Did you ever go talk to anybody about it? PTSD?
I started to Andrews because they started talking about it. But then when they put the word out, there was such a line at the door that they canceled the whole thing. But another thing, I think a kind of a funny story, which I just thought of, when I was in Vietnam, we had a commander's call, which everyone comes together, right, at the new NCO club on the base, which is pretty interesting. It was a nice building. We're all sitting around, and all of a sudden in walks 2 or 3 people carrying trays. One had a tray of joints, hundreds of joints, and a plant. And what the hell is this? And saying to you guys, does anyone know what this is? Are you guys familiar with, this is a plant, this is marijuana, very dangerous. It grows wild around here. You may have heard about that. And we prepared a bunch of joints so you guys can sample. This is, I swear to God.
Is the officers doing this?
Yes. Bizarre. Absolutely. What?
How long had you been out there when this happened? Would you say?
Been there a while, maybe 6 months.
Okay. And are you thinking this is a joke or something?
I don't know what to think. And they put it down on the table and said, you guys can take one and try it, and it's just so you know what it smells like, and this is the plant. So all of us are going. First thought was, is this a trap? My friend Tommy is saying, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. And what do you do with this? Do you put it in your nose? He was put a couple in his ears. It was a whole pile of them. I mean, we're talking about a tray. It took hours to roll all that. So they talked to us about drug abuse and how dangerous it was. Can you believe this is freaking nuts, right? So when the thing, the meeting and the discussion ended, you can take a few of these if you wish. So Tommy Glenn goes over and grabs a handful, fills his pockets. And some guys were like, I don't want any of that stuff, Some, a lot of people who were very, very straight about anything like that would, and so we're like, okay.
My gosh. Was that it? And that was it?
Yeah.
Nobody said anything about it after?
No.
What do you think? All these
no idea.
Crazy.
It is crazy. Another crazy thing that just popped into my mind was when we would rehearse the band. This is back in the war. We had a pet monkey that was tethered to a banana tree on the base. And when we were playing, the monkey was just like hang out in the tree, and we'd be drinking beer, and the monkey would come down and grab the beer and drink it, and then go back up. He would take your beer and run off with it up to the top of the banana tree, and he wouldn't, we'd say, hey, and we named him Colonel Spiker, who was he was the vice base commander. We named him. So at the chow hall, we would, when everyone came in, they would put their hat on a shelf or on a hook, and we stole Colonel Spiker's hat, and we took it to the seamstress to make it small, and we gave him a little uniform with Spiker on it, and it was Colonel Spiker the monkey was our little mascot for the band.
That's great.
Isn't that crazy? Sometimes we'd have a joint, and he would get so drunk that he'd fall out of the tree and just sort of hang there with his hat on, Colonel Spiker the monkey.
Sounds like your experience was just surreal.
It was. And there's so many, when I look at this page of things, I always find something, at least today, that I didn't mention. Our command, or our base commander, the vice commander was Spiker, who lost his radio to the VC. But Colonel Birdsong was the base commander, and Colonel Birdsong was a pilot. All these officers were, Air Force pilots, and because Colonel Spiker, he was a full bird colonel, he wanted to become a general. So to become a general, he needed a number of hours bombing raids and things like that.
Yeah.
Before he could move on to becoming a general. And so he decided that he would do target practice around the base with dummy bombs, these little blue bombs. So we had to order these bombs that were just target practice for him. So he wasn't going to go. He actually was supposed to be going on real bombing raids, but he decided that he didn't want to do that. So his bombing raids were around the base. We put out targets out in the field out there, and he would drop the little blue bombs, and we'd go out and dig them out of the dirt. And then, he would have other targets. And then he would do some aerobatics, and fly upside down over the base. And so he called that a bombing run.
So he could get his hours up and everything.
So he could get his hours up, so he could become a general.
Did he become a general?
I think so. And another thing about the monkey, which was kind of funny, is that one day we hear the loudspeaker, the PA over the base, a monkey by the name of Colonel Spiker. This is for everyone to hear. It's like MASH or something, you know what I mean? It's like a monkey answering to the name of Colonel Spiker is missing on the base. If anyone sees him, please let us know. Well, we were all looking all over the place for him. And we found him in the Airmen's Club drinking out of the toilet. He was drunk as a skunk. He would get drunk and then run away.
Was he just little like this?
Yeah, I have a picture of him. A macaque monkey. Very smart. He's pretty wild.
Seems like you always figured out how to make the best of any situation. That's what it seemed like to me.
I don't seem like that's what, I think that for me, coming back and getting back to normal, mundane, everyday life was so flipping boring for me that I enjoyed my time there. It was like madcap, right? Everything was not for everyone, just for my friend Tom and I and the guys in the band. Maybe even especially me, for some reason, ended up in all these circumstances that, were just wild. What can I say?
Yeah.
You've heard part of it. There are other things.
Yeah.
I pretty much touched on all the highlights. Yeah, but the whole thing, kind of when the loudspeaker went off and they said, "Has anyone on the base seen a monkey answering to?" Meanwhile, we have the colonel, the commander of the base, the vice commander, is named Colonel Spiker. And of course, Colonel Spiker was always pissed that someone stole his hat.
Did he ever figure out where it went?
He may have gotten an idea when the loudspeaker went off that we were looking for a monkey answering to the name of Colonel Spiker.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for sharing your stories. You're no worse the wear, my friend. You look great.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I guess it's my work, and I don't know. I was always a curious person with, a lot of luck, I think.
That factors into a lot. I feel like your personality strikes me is that you're just going to find a way to have fun no matter what you're doing.
I guess that's what we've been talking about.
You're going to make the best of whatever's happening and do it with you're going to find the humor in it, even if it's scary or weird or whatever. Yeah.
Even after I came back working at a 7-Eleven being robbed so many times.
Yes.
Wild. It is wild. But D.C. is a good place to get robbed. Go to work at a 7-Eleven in D.C. Unbelievable.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure. Really fascinating stories. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time.